All right, let's jump right in. We're going to talk about a fascinating and honestly a kind of terrifying idea called the Iron Law of Oligarchy. It's this theory that gets at a really old political puzzle, you know?
Here it is, the whole idea in a nutshell. It's a pretty bold statement from a German sociologist, Robert Michels, way back in 1911. What he's saying is that the second you try to organize anything, even for the most democratic reasons, you're on a one-way street to being ruled by a small group of elites.
So that's really the big question we're tackling today, right? How does a group that starts out with everyone on the same page, all equals, united by one mission, somehow always end up with a new ruling class? To figure this out, we're going to use a simple story, an analogy that makes it all click.
So let's set the scene. Imagine this perfect little utopian dream, a brand new community garden founded on the absolute best of intentions.
Okay, so here's the setup. 50 neighbors get together with this amazing mission: grow free organic food for the whole neighborhood. And their core values? They're crystal clear. Everyone is equal, there are absolutely no bosses, no hierarchy whatsoever. It's pure, direct democracy. I mean, what could possibly go wrong?
Well, as you can probably guess, reality hits, and it hits pretty fast. And that brings us to phase 1, where we see the very first tiny crack appear in this perfect dream.
The problem is, it's just pure chaos. You've got 50 people screaming about which garden hose to buy. The water bill? Oh yeah, that's not getting paid, because nobody's job is to actually pay it. So they do something that sounds totally reasonable. They elect a small, 3-person steering committee. But, and this is key, their mandate is super specific. They're just servants, right? Their only job is to handle the boring paperwork so everyone else can get back to gardening.
And bam, that's the first step Michels was talking about. It's called delegation. See, as a group gets bigger, pure democracy just stops working. It's way too inefficient. You have to give a smaller group the authority to just get stuff done. It seems so harmless, doesn't it? Just a simple, logical fix. But according to Michels, this is the innocent-looking seed from which the entire oligarchy grows.
So let's move on to phase 2 and see how this thing starts to snowball. Now that this committee is in place, something new and really important begins to happen. Something that shifts the balance of power for good.
So, the committee gets to work. They're spending weeks learning all these complicated city zoning laws. They're building relationships with city officials. They're gaining all this specialized knowledge. Now picture this. A regular member suggests planting some corn in a new spot. But Alice, from the committee, she just shuts it down flat. Nope, we can't, she says. Trust me, it's complicated. And the thing is, the other members can't really argue. They don't have the information. They just have to trust her.
And this creates what the theory calls information asymmetry. A gap in knowledge just opens up between the leaders and the members. All of a sudden, you have experts, the leaders, and amateurs, everybody else. Power isn't about votes anymore. It's about who has access to the facts. And this knowledge gap, it does more than just create a power imbalance. It actually creates a psychological divide. And that brings us right to phase 3, professionalization. And you can really feel that divide right here. I mean, look at this. On one side, you've got the gardeners, still doing the actual work, sweating out in the sun, seeing each other as equals. But on the other side, you've got what is now the administration. They're not doing the work anymore, they're managing the work. They're living in spreadsheets, and they're starting to see the gardeners not as their peers, but as a mass that needs to be managed.
Michels had a name for this: professional leaders. Their whole identity has changed. They don't do the work anymore, they manage it. And in doing so, they've developed their own little culture, totally separate from the very people they were supposed to be serving in the first place.
In this new identity, this distance, it leads us to the most critical stage of all. This is phase 4, the part that really puts the iron in the iron law. It's called goal displacement.
Okay, so here's the ultimate test. A big shot developer comes along and wants to buy half the garden to build a parking lot. Now, what was the original mission? To grow food, right? So the obvious answer is refuse! The group needs that land. But the oligarchy, our committee, they see it differently. Their choice, sell. And you have to ask why. Well, because fighting the developer is risky. It could destroy the entire organization and, more importantly, their power and their positions.
Let's be super clear about what just happened here. Goal displacement. It's that exact moment when a leader's main goal changes. It's not about the original mission anymore. Nope. The new mission is just preserving the organization itself. The survival of the institution has completely replaced the reason it was even created.
But here's the twist. This isn't just some hostile takeover by the people at the top.
As we're about to see in the final phase, the members themselves actually play a huge role in cementing this new power structure.
So, it's election time. A brand new gardener decides to challenge Alice for a seat on the committee. But just listen to how the crowd reacts. You hear whispers of, why would we change? Alice knows all the zoning laws. It's just too risky. And the result? She's re-elected in a landslide. The members actively, willingly trade their freedom for what feels like stability. They choose the comfort of being led by an expert.
And this is such a crucial piece of the argument, the consent of the masses. Michels believed that the members are often complicit in their own subjugation. Why? Because it's easier to be guided by a strong, knowledgeable leader than to carry the heavy burden of making all the tough decisions yourself. In a way, they accept the oligarchy.
Okay, so we've watched our perfect little utopian garden fall apart step by step. Now let's pull back from the analogy and see how this powerful and kind of depressing theory applies to, well, just about everything.
This table just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's the core conflict. In the democratic dream, power is something the people lend to their leaders. But in reality, it gets seized by experts. Knowledge is supposed to be shared, but it ends up being hoarded by the elite. The goal changes from achieving the mission to just keeping the institution alive. And leadership goes from being about service to being about ownership.
And you see this pattern playing out all over the real world, all the time. Think about labor unions, where the leaders can become these wealthy executives who are more worried about protecting the union's budget than calling a risky strike. Or how about political parties, where these passionate grassroots candidates swear they'll shake things up, only to become the very establishment they promised to destroy. It even happens in charities, where the bureaucracy can become so focused on organizational maintenance that it loses sight of actually finding the cure and putting itself out of business.
So, all of this leaves us with a really tough final thought to chew on. If Robert Michels is right, if this iron law is a real, unavoidable consequence of humans getting organized, then what does that mean for the future of any democratic group? What does it mean for the very ideal of democracy itself? It's a heavy question, for sure, but it's one this theory forces all of us to confront.